Pink line, you got your card. You're good. Yeah. Hello, hello, hello. How is everyone doing? I don't know. I didn't hear that. How was Kate's last talk, everybody? Come on, come on. Here we go again somewhere. Uh, I'm very, unfortunately, our next speaker is a lawyer. But he's one of the good guys, I promise. He's going to give a great talk here on Under the Sea. He's very Jack Custodian. And here, no further ado, here is Richard Marshall. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I have to tell you, I'm a little disappointed that everybody left. And I can understand why, because the competing speaker is damn good. He's got a good message for them. It's unfortunate we are competing for the same audience. But I want you to tell everybody what they missed, because they are going to miss a great presentation. Now, just so I don't feel too lonely, I would like everybody to move down toward the front, because I normally talk in terms of, rather than lectures, more like a seminar type process. And I like to interact with the audience. So you don't have to wait until the end to ask questions. If you want to ask questions when I'm talking, it does not bother me a bit, because I'm making it up as I go along the whole time. And I need that little additional inspiration of y'all making a comment or something. All right, as was introduced, I'm a lawyer, and people ask me, what kind of a lawyer am I? And I modestly tell them, a damn good one, and let it go with that, because it's true. There are very few lawyers that understand computer technology, that understand what you are interested in and what I like to practice. At one time, I was the nation's only cybersecurity attorney. The field has grown tremendously, which is a good thing. Now, how many of you know your lawyers? In what capacity, sir? I mean, not your personal lawyer, but your work lawyer, cybersecurity type, right?
Yeah. Well, not really, but learning and adapted and gotten a lot better.
Okay. If you don't know who your team lawyer is, go search him or her out and say hello before the fertilizer hits the ventilator. They need to know you, and you need to know them early on. Well, that's all I'm going to say about the legal profession. Although I am in favor of the Lawyer Full Employment Act. Now, another advertisement I want to do is ISSA. How many of you are members of ISSA? All right, I encourage all of you to become members of ISSA. You're from the Chicago chapter, as I recall. Very active chapter, one of the very best ones. Why do I care so much about ISSA? Because I think they're worthwhile. I'm also the general counsel for International ISSA, so I have to do that advertisement every so often. So if you're not a member of ISSA, talk to one of these guys that are members and let them tell you why it's a good thing for you to be a member. How many of you have ever heard a lawyer talk to you who was an NSA-trained hacker? If you've ever heard me speak, you've heard a lawyer who was an NSA-trained hacker talking to you. My hair wasn't quite as nice as yours, but at one time I did have hair. The case study that I would refer you to take a look at is called Eligible Receiver 97. Eligible Receiver 97. It was the first focused cyber attack against DoD telecommunications systems. And after months of preparation, when we actually launched the attack, and I had about 25 young hackers working with me, we brought down the DoD system immediately, in a matter of minutes. That got the attention of President Bill Clinton, who decided cybersecurity is something we need to pay attention to associated with DoD communications. And oh, by the way, finance communications, hospital communications, the whole schmear. The whole schmear. You can Google Eligible Receiver 97. There have been several books written about it, several articles written about it, and it was a hell of a lot of fun putting it together because, well, when you break into systems, if you don't do it correctly, you violate the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, And if you get caught and convicted, it's a felony, and you go to jail for a year or more, which is very disruptive to career advancement. So I briefed the DoD General Counsel. She was amazed at what we were going to be able to do, both technically and legally. But just the CYA, remember this is the federal government, she said, Rich, I think that's a wonderful idea, but I really think you need to go talk to Janet Reno. Janet Reno was the Attorney General. Now, Janet Reno, at that time, was 6'3". Janet Reno worked her way through college wrestling alligators. Successfully, I might add, because she was still alive. Phenomenal person. So we had top cover. And that's what you want to talk to your lawyers to make sure that what you're doing, you're not going to have to go to jail for, because it's very disruptive. The other book I'm going to recommend to you is written by Michael Dougherty. And here's the reason I want you to read that book. The book is entitled Devil Inside the Beltway. Now, why is that important? Michael was running a lab that tested for cancer. It got hacked into, and the hacker said, we know that you're violating a lot of laws, privacy laws, etc. So what we want is for you to pay us to protect your system. And he invoked the doctrine of Bullus Roris. He basically said, go pound sand, and reported it to the FBI and the Federal Trade Commission. The Federal Trade Commission and the FBI took the side of the hackers and said, Michael, you're doing bad things. These guys are trying to help you. Why don't you cooperate? They were just extortionists. They were black hat hackers. They were criminals. And Michael tells you all about it in that book. I guarantee you, if you start reading it tonight, you will not put it down until you finish it. It is that compelling a story. Okay, I know you didn't come here to hear me talk about that. I hope you came here for me to talk about this. 99.9% of the internet, international communications, goes through fiber optic cables throughout the world. When I discuss this, sometimes people say, oh no, everything goes via satellite. A geocenter in a satellite at 22,000 miles above the Earth, geocentered around the equator, with the Earth's rotation, can't handle the capacity, can't handle the capability. So if we relied on undersea cables for how long? When was the first undersea cable put in the water? 1874. 1874. Now, it wasn't fiber, it was cable, and it didn't last that long, but it demonstrated proof of concept. And so from that early stage, we've gone to a system now where undersea fiber optic cables can carry everything. And I'll tell you all about a particular program that we're involved in. You can see from the notes here, the stack of books, that's how much data can be transmitted in a very, very, very brief time over fiber optic cable systems. This is an example of our subsea undersea cable. Now, if there was a young woman in here who had blonde hair, I would ask her for a strand of her hair and pass it around. Because a fiber optic cable is about, no, you're a dude, and your hair is too thick. Your hair is bigger than our fiber optic. And I just wanted you to see how small that was. When we wrap this for protection, this thing is about the diameter of a water hose, the hose you use to water your lawn. And when we go offshore, we go along the continental shelf, we bury that cable about a meter and a half. We use a plow to dig a hole, bury that fiber, to keep it away from scuba divers, to keep it away from fishing nets, and to keep it away from anchors. Those are the three major threats close to shore of fiber optic cable. Whereas if it's on land, of course, the backhoe is the big fear associated with any cable system. And of course, the other thing that's a problem are adversary submarines, particularly those from Russia and China. And of course, I won't admit that we do the same thing, or so I've heard that we do the same thing. I probably should do it that way safely. All right, see if I can get to the next slide. This is a rough approximation of all of the cables in the world. Now, if you want to take pictures or have copies of my slides later, I'm happy to share those with you. You know, you set the trend, Kate. Yeah. All right, I've already told you how much they carry. Most of them, wherever they are in vulnerable places. But we need more and more demand, and I'll discuss that in the next slide. There is not enough now to take care of what we need. And part of the reason there's so much growth is because there's additional interest and additional need for the capability, and I'll discuss that in more detail with other slides. But the other driver that is pushing everything is AI. Everyone here refers to that as artificial intelligence. I don't. I hate that term. There's nothing artificial about it. We make it. It doesn't just appear out of thin air. I prefer to call it augmented intelligence because we are teaching a system how to think, how to replicate our thought process, do it quicker, faster, and in more depth. Let's see, we've talked about the growth. This slide depicts the massive growth that's taking place that we're experiencing now. Data centers are one of the big drivers. Every country wants a lot of data centers. And it's just a fascinating story to see how that is happening. You have a lot of data centers in the United States. Most of them are located in Virginia, which is a fascinating story because they have access to power. There is a whole coal plant in West Virginia that is devoted to generating power for all of the data centers in Virginia. China also has a lot of data centers. Singapore has a lot of data centers. But it doesn't take much imagination to realize why we want the data centers in the United States or why we want to have access to those data centers that are in the States, because it's a good opportunity for intelligence collection if you're in that kind of business. Not suggesting any of you are, but that's just a data point to take into consideration. Because what we're going to talk about is not just fiber optic. We're talking about security, communication security. And I use the term communication because it covers a broader area than cybersecurity. It includes that and everything else. So when Ira was talking about the various learning stages to do cybersecurity work, I'm talking at the PhD level, where everything you've learned about related to communication security is involved in what we're doing now. We've touched on this, the main corridors, US, Canada, Latin America not so much, Africa not so much, Middle East hardly much at all for the moment. Now, this area has been in the news. We're talking Egypt. You can see that up at the top. And when I first started this project, I asked, how is there fiber optic connections in the Middle East now? And they said, well, it all runs through Egypt. Oh, well, what's wrong with that? Well, it's 25 years old. Oh, well, that's not good. What's the other problem? Well, the system is very disruptive because of scuba divers off the coast, the coast of Egypt, because of anchors off the coast of Egypt, fishing nets, and probably some inefficient intermeddling by, oh, let's just say the Soviets, the Russians, just for, to use a good term. The other aspect of the Egyptian system is it's very monopolistic. They charge whatever the hell they can get away with. And because they charge so much, and because they're not reliable, no one wants to hook up to them. not even their neighbor, the Saudis. And I'll come back to that in a moment. So you've got the Straits of Hormuz, and I know everybody is not a geographical wizard. So the Strait of Hormuz is that area that is adjacent to Iran. And they are a very disruptive influence in everything. So the cables, the international cables, are in international waters, but that doesn't bother the Iranians. They could give a rat's fur coat. They just go ahead and try to be as disruptive as they possibly can. So that creates a problem. The other major problem area is the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is right off the coast of Yemen. And we all know what's going on in Yemen. The Hutus are raising hell, and nobody's doing enough about it to kind of shut them down. Not to get into too much political stuff, but the Iranians are providing tremendous supplies for them. And there are those who say we're not taking appropriate action to eliminate the Hutus. That would take care of that threat. Now, as a result of that problem, 90% of the shipping cannot go through the Suez Canal and go through the Red Sea because it's blocked. And some of the ships that were sunk drug their ankles as they were anchors as they were sinking and disrupted the remaining cables in the Red Sea. To show you how disruptive that is, Singapore, which was relying on those cables in the Red Sea, can't go that way anymore. Ships that used to use the Red Sea have to go around the Cape of Good Hope, around Africa, which adds about 30 to 45 days to shipping, which adds to additional costs for everybody. From a personal standpoint, what it's done for us is we can't use the Red Sea to put in one of our cable systems, and I'll touch on that a little bit later, but I just wanted to alert you to that area. This is an important complex because we need this to get to India, Pakistan, and also to Africa. Okay, we talked about data centers and the locations. Data centers are very important for economic growth. We have been approached by, I call them the four stands, the Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, et cetera, those countries between Turkey and Asia. They want us to extend our system into their countries because they realize it would be good for economic growth, and they're right. Give you an example of good economic growth. How many of you remember Y2K or have heard of Y2K? You know, the older ones in the crowd, the ones who read a lot, obviously have. I was on the President's Commission when Y2K happened. And the problem was we did not have people here in the United States that remembered how to change the code so that we could continue operating going from 2 digits to 4 digits. And we worried about where we were going to put airplanes on that fateful day when the computers didn't work. And I'll come back to that beautiful story in a minute. But one of the reasons there is such an active, proficient, and economically viable computer center in India is in Bangalore. Bangalore formerly was a retirement community in India. So a lot of computer programmers retired in India and Bangalore, in a beautiful area. So when Y2K happened, the only place we could go to get the technical talent we needed was in Bangalore. And so that's become their Silicon Valley in India. And that has demonstrated to the world how important it is to have that kind of technology that's readily available. Bandwidth we've talked about, not enough in Africa, but that's growing more and more. More demand in the Middle East. We'll skip this. Well, you can read it. You'll get a copy of the slide. Here's what we really want to talk about. All right, this is our system, Centurion. We start in France and Italy. We go under the Mediterranean via undersea cable systems. That's put in by Subcom. Subcom is the world's best cable laying company in the world. The other two, one is in France and one is in Japan. Did a competitive bid with all three. Subcom won hands down. And it just happens to be an American company, but that's not why we picked them. We picked them because they were the best in the world. And originally, we were going to just go to Israel. And then from Israel, we were going to go across to their neighbor, Jordan. And then from Jordan, we were going to go over the top of Saudi Arabia into the Red Sea, go around Saudi Arabia to the bottom of the Red Sea, into the Arabian Sea, to Pakistan, India, and Singapore. But during the Abraham Accords, countries made friends with each other. And two of the countries that made friends with each other at that time was KSA, Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. So we had an opportunity to go into Saudi Arabia and help build their system. Now, normally, what we do is connect countries to countries. But because of the addition of Saudi Arabia, we are helping them build their interior system. Remember, they didn't have one. They don't have one because of the limited connection they had with the Egyptians. So we have connections with all of the adjacent countries to include Saudi Arabia to build the system. And you can see a list of all of the countries that we're connected with and all of the data points that were put in data farms. And it's a multi-billion-dollar project. These are the countries that are directly impacted by T's, and these that are indirectly impacted. Pakistan, we have a direct connection with another line. Afghanistan, we've talked to Iraq, and I've told you about three of the stands. I've mentioned four of the stands. We had discussions with their ambassadors. That's how important they view this. And this is on our southern route, the one that goes through the Red Sea. And you can see the additional countries that are connected there. Somalia, Sudan, Tanzania, Djibouti, which is right across from Yemen. We've talked to them last week in Singapore. And I said, look, we'd love to connect with you, but it's kind of difficult to get to you now that the Red Sea is closed off. And they said, what's the problem? I said, the Yemens, the Hutus. And they said, oh, they're our cousins. We can work that. Really? I mean, that's the kind of international fascination that goes on. And let me tell you another thing that I find absolutely fascinating about this project. You talk about people not getting along because of their nationalities or because of their religion. That's true. But I can tell you, it is not true worldwide. We have people from Palestine working side by side with Israelis, with Saudis, with Indians, with Pakistanis. They all get along because they have a common interest. Once you get to know people, a lot of that animosity goes away. And that's why I'm a big believer in people-to-people programs rather than government-to-government programs. I'm not anti-government, but I can see the positive result of people working together once they get to know each other. Two of the board members on my board, one is from Saudi, one is from Israel. At the board meetings, they greet each other in their respective languages. The guy from Saudi Arabia greets the Israeli, even today, in Hebrew. The Israeli greets the Saudi in Arabic. That, to me, is a positive sign that we can work together when we want to. It's a very positive people-to-people program. Last summer, before October 8th, we took 25 individuals from the Middle East, different cultures, different countries, that worked with us, put them on a yacht in Dubai, rode around in the water for 4 hours, and everybody got along. No fighting. Now, I will admit they were in a boat. There was no damn place else for them to go. But they started talking to each other as human beings rather than enemies. And that is such a positive feeling to know that this kind of stuff can have that kind of positive impact on the world at large. All right, I talked a little bit about Saudi Arabia. They're big proponents of this system because they realize the economic advantage that they will now have. The fiber system that we put in is the very best, the most advanced possible. Made by Corning Glassworks. Corning Glassworks is up near my mother's home, Elmira, New York. But the actual fab plant for this is made down in Wilmington, North Carolina. They're the most advanced manufacturer of fiber optic cable systems in the world. I've personally been there. I've personally walked the floor because I'm concerned about one of the subjects that was talked about earlier today, and that has to do with supply chain management. So you see, everything that's associated with cybersecurity is involved in what we're doing with the big topic of communication security. I wanted to make sure there was no possibility, no reasonable way or no rational way where someone could put in an undocumented feature into that fiber optic cable system. Now, one of the other areas that are potentially weakened with fiber optic cable systems are the landing sites. Now recall that we are basically internet. We connect country to country with the exception of Saudi. Then we're doing a lot of interior work with Saudi, and I'll go through that in a moment. But all of our sites are protected to make sure nobody else can get into them. And that's particularly important for the Israelis because they don't want the Saudis listening to them. And of course, the Saudis have that same concern about the Israelis. And we all know how damn good the Israelis are at hacking into systems. But we are convinced that we have adequate security to do that. And of course, we'll find out the hard way, no doubt, like everybody else does. But if you don't do something, if you don't bake it in, security is not something you add on. It's something you put in the very beginning. And that's very, very important. Good message there. But the kingdom really wants us there. They really need us there. Neom is the new city in the far northwest portion of the country. We're going to be connected to them. One of the challenges that we have there and with Saudi Arabia is that there are some systems, and I hate to admit this, but it's true, that use Huawei equipment. Now, Huawei is equipment, according to many people who know what in the hell they're talking about, is an advanced research center for Chinese intelligence. We are aware of that, and we have a way to protect against that, and I'll discuss that very, very briefly in just a moment. I just want you to keep listening to me and hang on for more. We're part of a new company up in Canada, and they're involved in every step of the way to make sure we have the very best cybersecurity, product security ever. They also support the Canadian version of NSA. They're also heavily involved in some other classified projects, but we have a development project with them, a very close working relationship, personal and professional close relationship with the CEO of that company. And other than what I have on this slide and what I've said is about all I can talk about this, all I'm permitted to talk about this. All right. There should be one other slide. Okay, do we have anybody here from, can we get that other slide? Thank you. I was building this as I was going along. I got it, I think most of it I got to you by Thursday and the rest by Friday. Two more slides. I think it's number two. This is number one. Then there was one other one. And then after that, the video. If you'd stand by, please. Okay. Anybody here from this company? Nobody? All right. Here's the unique thing about this particular company. I talked to you about the domestic stuff that we're doing inside of Saudi Arabia. They've never done this before. They're asking us. We do internet, we do international fiber optic connection. We don't do interior. So I had to get somebody who knew how to do interior. So after a lot of research, this is the entity that I focused on. We've got a partnership with them. This is an American company. They are very, very good. So if you're looking for one, this is an unsolicited, gratuitous comment about them. All right, then the next thing I think you're going to really love All right, now remember, we put an awful lot of this fiber in the ground terrestrially, and we talked briefly about how in the United States, for example, the backhoe is the main threat. In Saudi Arabia, the main threat to our system are the Bedouins who roam around in the desert looking for copper. They don't understand the distinction yet between fiber and copper. So they kind of dig up the system, realize it's fiber, and walk the hell away from it. Then we have to put it back together again. And this is how we do it. This guy is in the Saudi desert. He's in scuba gear, and he's going to dive in the sand to find those pieces and splice them. Doesn't that look like a hell of a fun job? This is not a Hollywood or Bollywood production. This is real stuff. Can you imagine the job description? Can you imagine the liability? That's wind blowing the sand in the desert. Talk about a workplace environment, a hostile workplace environment. He's not a prisoner of war. He does this because he wants to. And when I see this portion, I'm thinking of the Southern phrase, come back, y'all, you hear? He does come back. Okay, thank you. Thank you for helping me put all of this together. And thank you for staying and paying attention. Anybody want to ask questions? I said you could ask them all along, but yes, ma'am. I'm 79 years old. I can't hear shit. I mean, I can't hear that well.
I thought you were going to make it through too.
Going to give me a microphone again. Watch out. So, could you explain how the overground is going to work, going from Israel then over Jordan, and then you're going to bury it through the desert?
Yeah. Two of our sites, landing sites in the Israeli area, one was in what is known as Palestine, the Gaza Strip, and the other in the main part of Israel. They were both damaged on October 8th, but they're back and revived now. So those two sites are connected underwater connections on the coast. And then from there, we go underground, fiber, underground into Jordan. And then the routes from Jordan, now we have two routes from Jordan. One is parallel to the pipeline that goes from Jordan into Saudi Arabia. That is very, very important to us. And I'm glad you asked that question because it brings up another subject. Physical security, overhead physical security about the underground portions or the portions of our system that's underground. I'm in communication with two entities. One provides long-range surveillance drones so they can patrol the area to see where bad things may be occurring. And then I'm also in discussion with an entity down in Tampa, Florida, that has a non-lethal way of taking care of people who get in the way, if you know what I mean. It's too sensitive to talk about here, but I've seen it. It is amazing. If you were a horse, you would be a gelding after that, if you kind of can figure that out. Well, it's very disruptive technology. I think they need to dial it down a little bit. So we're still in discussions with that because of liability issues. But we're using that not only to protect the underground portions, but also to protect our landing sites, because a landing site is a very attractive area for nefarious actors to come in and try to be disruptive. So we want to make sure everybody that comes in is nice. Oh, the other thing I should mention too are the data centers in Saudi Arabia. Is there anyone here from Saudi Arabia? Because I'm going to touch on a politically sensitive subject and I don't want to be chastised for that. The data centers in Saudi Arabia are going to be staffed, I'm using that word, not manned, but staffed by females. We're training them because they work very efficiently, because we've learned that a lot of the Saudi men, it's more expensive, it's more economical to not let them come to work. Just pay them to stay home. The women want to work. So that expands. I mean, I'm not doing this for social stuff. This is a pure economic thing. They want the jobs. They can do the jobs. We just train them. And that really helps helps diversify the Saudi economy, bringing in that technology, bringing in that high-speed internet, bringing in the lowest latency system in the world, meaning that's the fastest system in the world. We can go from France and Italy all the way to India without having to amplify the signal. That's how amazing this new system is. And can you imagine from a banking standpoint how you can take advantage of that high speed in doing financial transactions? And this just really appeals to the Saudi banking system. They want to be a center for banking, not just in the Middle East, but in the world as well. Does that answer your questions? Thank you. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, thank you for being such an appreciative and attentive audience, and I appreciate you sticking around, and tell those who left what they missed.